I never thought I'd be saying this right now, only 19 games into the 2025 season, that it's time for Stephanie White to go. The Indiana Fever needs to fire Stephanie White. This is not going to work. What we're seeing is not going to work. It's just not going to work.
As we need to be honest here, Stephanie White's not going to change. Stephanie White is not going to change. Stephanie White is not going to stop until her style of drag everyone down to their level basketball prevails.
Stephanie White just experienced her worst nightmare. Fans are calling for her resignation after the Fever's embarrassing blowout loss, and the heat is getting unbearable. The coaching decisions were so bad that even Caitlin Clark supporters are questioning everything. This might be the beginning of the end for White's coaching career in Indiana.
Yesterday, reduced Caitlin Clark to a role player. She turned a star into a role player.
Do you think Stephanie White should resign, or does she deserve more time to figure this mess out? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. The Indiana Fever coaching situation has officially reached crisis mode, and Stephanie White is scrambling to save her job after one of the most catastrophic coaching performances we've ever witnessed. The fan base is in complete revolt, social media is on fire with calls for her resignation, and honestly, can you blame them?
Marsh is trying to turn Angel Reese into a star. Stephanie White is trying to turn Caitlin Clark into a role player. Let that sink in.
Let's talk about what actually happened during that disaster against the Golden State Valkyries. This wasn't just a bad loss. This was coaching malpractice on full display. White made the mind-boggling decision to turn Caitlin Clark, the best point guard in the WNBA, into a role player. She literally took the ball out of her hands and stuck her in a corner like she was some bench warmer. The decision to start Aria McDonald at point guard while moving Clark to the wing was so absurd that it defies all logic. McDonald wasn't even on a WNBA roster 4 weeks ago, and suddenly, she's running the offense over a player who led the league in assists last year? The audacity is breathtaking. White's explanation for this disaster was that she wanted 2 primary ball handlers on the floor. That sounds cute in theory, but in practice, it looked like a complete train wreck. Clark barely touched the ball, the offense was disjointed, and they scored a pathetic 61 points on their home floor. That's high school level production from a professional team. The fan reaction has been swift and brutal. Social media is flooded with demands for White's resignation, and the local radio shows are getting bombarded with angry callers. People are saying they're done buying tickets if this is the product they're going to get. That's the kind of fan revolt that gets coaches fired.
With Stephanie White under fire by Fever fans, she blasted her team after the squad's loss to the Golden State Valkyries, which was a rough watch, no question about it.
But here's what really gets me. White had the nerve to blame the players after the game. She talked about lack of competitive fire and attention to detail, but conveniently ignored the fact that she completely changed the offensive system 2 days before the game. Of course, the players looked confused and disjointed. They had no idea what they were supposed to be doing.
Steph, they were coming in here talking about lack of focus, lack of knowing the game plan. How do you summarize kind of what you saw out there?
I was disappointed because I felt like there was a lack of competitive fire. With the exception of about 2 5-minute spurts, our attention to detail was poor. I'm not sure if it's not knowing the game plan as much as, because if it's not knowing the game plan, then that's a whole nother conversation, as much as not executing the game plan. Our attention to detail.
The numbers tell the whole story too. When Clark plays point guard, the Fever average over 88 points per game. When she doesn't play at all, they average about 80 points. But when she's on the floor playing out of position like she did against Golden State, they score 61 points. That's not a coincidence. That's a direct result of terrible coaching decisions. White's timeout management was equally atrocious. Every time Clark started to get something going, White would take her out of the game. It was like she was actively trying to sabotage her own team's chances. Good coaches recognize when their best player is finding a rhythm and they ride that wave. White did the exact opposite. The defensive scheme was just as problematic. The Valkyries were allowed to trap Clark at half court with no adjustments. Where were the screens to get her free? Where was the ball movement to punish the double teams? These are basic basketball concepts that any competent coach should understand. The substitution patterns made no sense either. Lexi Hull, who's arguably their best perimeter defender, was sent to the bench to make room for this experiment. So not only did they weaken their offense by taking the ball away from Clark, they also weakened their defense by benching their best defender. It's like White was trying to lose.
About that, but the competitiveness and the attention to detail, and willingness to play with multiple levels of effort. Prime examples when we get defensive stops, but then they get multiple offensive rebounds. That's 1-2. That's competitive fire, and that's unacceptable.
The most frustrating part is that this team has shown what they're capable of when properly coached. They beat the Liberty, they beat the Lynx in the Commissioner's Cup, and they've had genuinely impressive performances, but then White goes and pulls stunts like this, and it makes you wonder if she's even qualified to coach at this level. The timing couldn't have been worse either. Clark was just coming back from injury, and instead of easing her back into her natural role, White decided to completely change her position. That's not just bad coaching, that's potential career sabotage. You don't mess with a player's confidence when they are already dealing with injury concerns. The fan base that was already frustrated with the team's inconsistency has now reached its breaking point. Season ticket holders are threatening to cancel their renewals, merchandise sales are plummeting, and the general mood around the organization is toxic. That's the kind of environment that forces ownership to make difficult decisions.
Undisciplined. I felt like our energy and our competitive fire was not there, and that's disappointing.
Why do you think you had some of these inconsistencies when it comes to focus and engagement, things like that?
I'd say discipline more so than focus. I think this is a group that focuses, but you can focus, and then you have to be able to go out and be disciplined enough to execute it, right? I'm not sure. We're as coaches, that's our job to figure it out. Why it is. You've seen it in spurts, you've seen it in moments, you've seen it with certain lineups. So finding those lineups that we've seen it with consistently, and maybe keeping those together. There's always going to be adjustments when you're working people back into the lineup.
White's post-game press conference was particularly telling. She looked rattled, defensive, and completely unprepared for the criticism that was coming her way. When reporters asked about her decision-making, she gave vague answers about wanting different looks and reducing pressure on Clark, but anyone with eyes could see that the strategy was a complete failure. The comparison to other coaches around the league is stark. Look at how Sandy Brondello uses Sabrina Ionescu with the Liberty, or how Cheryl Reeve maximizes Nafisa Collier's potential with the Lynx. Those coaches understand their star players' strengths and build systems around them. White seems determined to force Clark into her system rather than adapting her system to Clark's strengths. The organizational pressure is mounting too. The Fever invested heavily in this roster specifically to build around Clark, and White was hired to be the coach who could maximize that investment. If she can't deliver results, the front office will have no choice but to make a change.
Galen, we'll start with you. Just how did it first of all feel to be out there, and second of all, what do you think the offense was just so disjointed here today?
It felt good to be out there. I thought we started really well. I thought we were competitive. I thought we played with energy in the first 5 minutes. And then, when they kind of went on their first run, it kind of deflated us a little bit, which I'm not really sure why. But the offense, I think, for us, it starts on defense. And we, struggled, scouting report-wise. We struggled personnel. We struggled to do what the coaches asked of us, and then overall we just played with more energy and effort, and those are the things that just can't happen. So it's every single person on our team, and nobody played well today. And
the media coverage has been increasingly critical as well. Reporters who were initially supportive of White's hiring are now asking tough questions about her coaching philosophy and decision-making process. When you lose the media, you're usually not far from losing your job. The player body language during the game was particularly concerning. You could see the frustration on Clark's face as she stood in the corner waiting for touches that never came. Aaliyah Boston looked confused about her role in the offense. Kelsey Mitchell seemed hesitant to shoot because the flow was so disrupted. That's what happens when you completely change your system without proper preparation. The effort level was another red flag. When players don't understand what they're supposed to be doing, they tend to play tentatively. That's exactly what happened against Golden State. The Fever looked like they were playing not to make mistakes rather than playing to win, and that's a direct reflection of poor coaching. The scheduling excuse doesn't hold water either. Yes, it was an early afternoon start, but these are professional athletes who should be able to adjust to different tip times. The fact that they came out looking unprepared and disorganized speaks to coaching, not scheduling. White's explanation about wanting to reduce pressure on Clark is particularly insulting to fans' intelligence. Clark thrives under pressure. That's what makes her special. Taking the ball out of her hands doesn't reduce pressure, it reduces her impact and makes the entire team worse. The development of other players has stagnated under White as well. Outside of Clark, who was already elite when she arrived, what player on this roster has actually improved? Boston seems to have regressed, Mitchell is wildly inconsistent, and the role players haven't taken any steps forward. That's coaching. The chemistry issues go beyond just X's and O's too. There seems to be a philosophical disconnect between what White wants to do and what would actually make this team successful. That kind of tension is toxic to team culture and leads to exactly the kind of performance we saw against Golden State. The fan investment in this team is at an all-time high because of Clark, but White's coaching is squandering that goodwill. People are tuning in to watch Clark do amazing things, not to watch her stand in a corner while a backup point guard runs the show. That's not sustainable from a business perspective. The pressure from ownership has to be immense right now. They're seeing ticket sales, merchandise revenue, and television ratings tied directly to Clark's performance and popularity. When the coach actively works against that, it becomes a business decision as much as a basketball decision. The locker room dynamics are probably strained as well. When your best player is being misused this badly, it creates resentment and confusion throughout the entire roster. Players start wondering if they're next to be randomly moved out of position or benched for inexplicable reasons. White's track record doesn't inspire confidence either. Her previous stint with the Fever was mediocre at best, and her time away from the WNBA didn't exactly prove she was ready for this level of responsibility. The honeymoon period is officially over, and the results speak for themselves. The national media attention on this situation is growing too. When your coaching decisions become a national talking point for all the wrong reasons, that puts additional pressure on the organization to act. The WNBA can't afford to have one of its marquee players being misused this badly. The contract situation adds another layer of complexity. White was given a multi-year deal, so firing her would come with financial implications. But at some point, the cost of keeping a failing coach becomes greater than the cost of making a change. The assistant coaching staff has to be questioning things as well. When the head coach makes decisions this questionable, it puts the entire staff in an awkward position. They can either speak up and risk their jobs, or stay quiet and watch the ship sink. The player development staff is probably frustrated too. They've been working with these players to maximize their potential within certain roles, and then the head coach comes in and completely changes everything. That undermines months of preparation and relationship building. The front office has to be getting pressure from ownership, sponsors, and the league office when your coaching decisions are actively hurting the product on the court and the business off the court. Something has to give. That something is usually the coach. The timing of a potential coaching change would be tricky, but not unprecedented. Teams have fired coaches mid-season before, and if the situation continues to deteriorate, the Fever might have no choice. The question is whether they can afford to wait much longer. The available coaching alternatives aren't great right now, which might be buying White some time, but if the performances don't improve dramatically, the organization will have to make a move regardless of who's available to replace her. The fan patience has officially run out. These aren't fair-weather fans complaining about a few bad games. These are people who have invested emotionally and financially in this team, and they're watching their investment get squandered by poor coaching decisions. The motion offense system that White insists on running is clearly not working with this roster. Clark is at her best when she's controlling pace and creating for others, not when she's running around screens hoping to get open looks. The system is fundamentally incompatible with her skill set. The pregame preparation was obviously inadequate too. The Valkyries came out with a clear game plan to pressure Clark and force the Fever into uncomfortable situations. A good coach would have prepared their team for that pressure, but White seemed caught off guard by it. The in-game adjustments were non-existent. When something isn't working in basketball, you change it. But White stubbornly stuck with her failed experiment for the entire game, watching her team get blown out rather than admitting her mistake and fixing it. The fourth quarter was particularly embarrassing. Down big with their season potentially slipping away, White continued to run the same ineffective sets that had failed all game. There was no urgency, no creativity, no desperation to try something different. The press conference after the game was almost as bad as the game itself. White showed no accountability for her role in the disaster, instead choosing to blame the players for not executing her brilliant game plan. That's not leadership, that's cowardice. The social media reaction has been absolutely savage. Fans are posting side-by-side comparisons of Clark's stats when she plays point guard versus when she plays off the ball, and the numbers are damning. There's no defending what White did to this team. The local media has turned on White too. Beat reporters who usually give coaches the benefit of the doubt are openly questioning her decision-making and wondering if she's in over her head. That's a dangerous sign for any coach. The the athletic director and general manager have to be fielding angry calls from boosters and sponsors who invested money in this team expecting to see Clark utilized properly. When business partners start complaining, jobs are on the line. The player agent community is probably taking notice as well. If you're representing a star player, you don't want to see them get misused by incompetent coaching. That kind of reputation can hurt an organization's ability to attract talent in the future. The league office might even be concerned about this situation. Clark is one of the faces of the WNBA, and having her misuse this badly reflects poorly on the entire league. They have a vested interest in seeing their stars succeed. The season ticket renewal period is coming up, and this kind of performance could have lasting financial implications for the organization. Fans who were excited about Clark's potential are now questioning whether it's worth their money to watch her get coached poorly. The merchandise sales are probably taking a hit too. When fans lose faith in the coaching staff and the team's direction, they're less likely to buy jerseys and other team gear. That revenue stream is crucial for small market teams like Indiana. The television ratings for future games could suffer as well. People tune in to watch Clark do amazing things, not to watch her stand in corners. If White continues to misuse her, casual fans will find something else to watch. The organizational culture is becoming toxic too. When the head coach makes decisions this questionable, it creates doubt throughout the entire organization. Players, staff, and front office personnel all start questioning the direction and leadership. The comparison to successful organizations is stark. Teams like Las Vegas and Seattle have coaches who understand how to maximize their talent. The Fever have a coach who seems determined to minimize their best players' impact. The historical context makes this even worse. The Fever have struggled for years to find consistent success, and they finally have a generational talent who could change everything. But instead of building around her strengths, they're wasting her prime years with questionable coaching. The opportunity cost is staggering. Every game that Clark has misused is a game that could have been used to build chemistry, develop systems, and create momentum for a playoff run. Instead, they're experimenting with lineups that clearly don't work. The fan trust that took years to build is being destroyed in real time. People who believed in this organization and invested their time and money are watching their faith get rewarded with coaching malpractice. That trust is hard to rebuild once it's lost. Stephanie White is fighting for her coaching life right now, and honestly, she might not survive much longer. The fan revolt is real, the performance was inexcusable, and the pressure is mounting. Do you think she should resign or get fired? Drop your thoughts below, smash that like button, and subscribe for more WNBA drama.